In times of war, mankind has the responsibility of witnessing the scope of human capacity. While many times this means we glimpse into the darkest violence imaginable, we also have the chance to show our quality. How we as a country treat our own prisoners of war is a reflection of our grace and dignity, or lack thereof. This is an oft-forgotten World War II tale of the Midnight Massacre in Salina, Utah. This is Below the Salt. And welcome back.
Hi.
How's it going?
I'm doing okay. I'm
Yeah?
excited to hear about this because I don't know about it.
You don't know like anything about it?
Nope.
Okay. Well, I feel like a lot of people have a World War II story. How like, oh, my grandpa or my great uncle or whatever.
For sure.
And I feel like that's just as true in Utah as it is anywhere else.
Definitely.
Do you have any World War II stories that are kind of interesting?
Oh, absolutely. Could go on and on about some of the people that I know that fought in World War II. You know, my step-great-grandpa. One of my mom's childhood neighbors. Who became a close family friend, and I knew her when I was a kid too. Had a crazy story that I could get into.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I've got a couple stories too. My grandfather on my mom's side was in Europe, and my grandfather on that same side actually was in the Pacific. So I have ones on both sides of what's going on, and so it's very interesting. And World War II was something that kind of affected everyone in some way.
Just kind of.
Okay, well, I mean, yeah, just a global war, but it is interesting how human conflict can kind of like be this big unifying collective human consciousness thing. It's interesting. And Utah, of course, was no slouch when it came to participation in the war.
Yeah, let's jump right in. Let's
Okay.
do it.
During World War II, the state of Utah was home to about 15,000 Italian and German prisoners. So I think they chose Utah as a prisoner of war camp because it was like really inland.
Yeah.
Like they weren't worried
about. There was lots of space to do it. They had a lot of Japanese Americans.
Yes, and I think
well.
we're going to be doing an episode later on about one of the Japanese internment camps that was here in Utah. I think you're covering that one.
Yeah, I am. I've been down where it was.
Is it Topaz? Okay, cool.
Yes.
Which, interestingly, Topaz Mountain is where one of the searches for Susan Powell took place.
Yes,
so it's that same area. It's all connected.
Utah.
Yeah, it's like there's like 4 places here. So these 15,000 Italian and German prisoners were distributed across several camps in Utah. Camp Salina was located in course of course in the small central Utah town of Salina. This was kind of a temporary branch camp to accommodate the overflow of prisoners from Fort Douglas, where they had a very big POW camp. The camp was occupied from 1944 to 1945 by about 250 Germans, so very small, not huge at all. A lion's share of them were at Fort Douglas, which is it's in the Salt Lake County. It's in the kind of the south western part of the county, and it is our major military base here outside of Hill Air Force Base. Most of these 250 Germans were from Rommel's Africa Corps, so they had been captured during the war in Africa, and they had been sent to the United States. It was a very simple complex. They had about 43 tents, and I promise why this is relevant will pop up later. It was a simple complex with 43 tents, and all the tents had wooden floors. There was an officer's quarters for the German officers. Like the German officers were kind of were kind of put in charge of their own men.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and there were 3 guard towers around the perimeter. Before it was a prisoner of war camp, Camp Salina was a civilian conservation corps facility. So it was just kind of, I think it's kind of like a National Guard type thing, just a place to post people. Unlike many other American prison camps, which were built in isolated areas far away from towns and stuff, Camp Salina was located inside the town of Salina. So it was at the eastern end of Main Street. And that was because Salina wasn't too big, and the town itself is kind of isolated.
Yes.
So there's no point in like making it further isolated and like
even been down there?
building. I have actually never been to Salina. It's kind of off the beaten track. Yeah. Anything that's not really on that main I-15 corridor. It's a pretty small town. It's pretty hard to get over to.
So long to get to.
It does.
So boring.
It is really boring. We'll somewhat regularly drive from Salt Lake to St. George and Las Vegas, or even to California. Yep. And the stretch between Utah County and basically anything else in the state is really...
It's tough.
Really flat. Well, it's not flat, but it's really desert and boring. There's nothing to see. They up the speed limit to like 80 miles an hour because they're like, there's no one out here to even hit you. So... It's definitely in the middle of nowhere, and it's hot. It's hot out there in the summer. It's not like the Germans were having a vacation. That's for sure. They were not. They're kind of miserable. But they had been sent there because they were supposed to go help with the sugar beet harvest in Salina. Okay. Sugar beets are one of the few things that can grow in Utah. Yeah, seriously. And Utah's soil is pretty arid, so it takes something hardy like a sugar beet to be able to handle them. Yeah. In fact, one of our local high schools is called the Beet Diggers. And to this day is called the Beet Diggers because this part of town where it is, that's all they had. Yeah, and they actually voted to keep that name, which is very interesting. Very recently. So they were sent down there to help with the harvest of sugar beets and other produce. And according to Pat Bagley, who's one of our local political cartoonists, and one of our mainstays that's been at the Salt Lake Tribune for a very, very long time, they were a very well-behaved and friendly group to the locals. They didn't have to spend all their time in camp. They could kind of peruse the town, actually, if they wanted to, with escorts and stuff. Yeah, they weren't just chilling in their camp their whole time. They had to go. Right, and they had to go and help work on all these farms, so they had to move around pretty freely. So, soldiers that were typically considered unfit for frontline service, such as those with behavioral problems, were typically assigned guard duty to the camp. Okay. I think it was kind of a punishment thing. It was like, that doesn't you have to go.
You're doing so good here. Go guard this camp.
Yeah, well, and it's not like it was Fort Douglas either. It was the overflow camp where where they were helping with produce. You know.
In Salina, Utah.
Yeah, it's hot, kind of miserable, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So that's where you get to go if you're causing trouble. Mm-hmm. Private Clarence V. Bertucci was born in New Orleans on September 14th, 1921. He dropped out of school in 6th grade and joined the Army in 1940. After 5 years of service, including a tour to England with an artillery unit, Bertucci seemed to be incapable of being promoted and also had a discipline problem. According to later testimony, he was unsatisfied with his tour and, get this, he said he felt cheated out of his chance to kill Germans. Yeah, so we're dealing with someone who has a couple. He has issues. And within 5 years in the Army, and if you're working towards it and not being able to be promoted, that's an asterisk, I think. Yeah. So, he was quoted as saying once, "Someday I will get my Germans. I will get my turn." So, like, the Army to him is just an opportunity to kill people.
Captain America would not be proud of him.
Yeah, no, Captain America would be frowning at him with a fierce look. It's just thank you very much. It's like I said in the intro, like, this war gives people the opportunity to do the best thing or the worst thing, and
there's not a lot of middle ground there.
There really isn't, and so when people get the opportunity to do this, they have a lot of people have ideas about what war is about, and they go after what they want. Yep. Apart from overtly expressing his hatred of Germans, Clarence did not show any indications of what he was planning on doing in the days before. Let's see, what day was it? in the days before July 7th.
Mm-hmm.
He was 23 years old at the time, so.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so he's 23, he's young, brash. He's been sent to a camp because he has discipline issues. He's just struggling, this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he decided to make some pretty terrible decisions. On the night of July 7th, 1945, so pretty close to the end of the war, Bertucci was out drinking. In fact, the fact that the war might be coming to a close might have been part of his mindset, yes.
Okay.
He was out drinking. He drank several glasses of beer. He stopped at a cafe on Main Street to have some coffee and to speak with a waitress. So he was like buying time until his shift started at midnight.
Okay. Stop. He's going out drinking before his shift?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
He stopped at a cafe on Main Street to have some coffee and to speak with a waitress, telling her, quote, "Something exciting is going to happen tonight." So he's definitely premeditating here.
Okay.
Before reporting at guard duty back at the camp. After the midnight changing of the guard, Bertucci waited for the previous watch to go to bed, and then he climbed up the guard tower nearest to the officers' quarters, loaded the .30 caliber M1917 Browning machine gun that was mounted at the position, and opened fire on the tents of the sleeping Germans.
Wow.
Yeah, prisoners. Fish in a barrel, no chance, not combat. Definitely a war crime.
Yeah, and a war crime.
Yep.
Don't forget that.
Mm-hmm. Moving the gun back and forth, Bertucci hit 30 of the 43 tents before being removed from the tower by another soldier.
Mm-hmm.
Bertucci was quoted to have said at the time, Get me more ammo, I'm not done yet."
Wow.
He must have run out of ammo before they even had a chance to get up there.
Maybe that's why they could pull him off.
Yeah, no, I'm sure he might have turned the gun on his fellow soldiers. Yeah. With 3 big trigger pulls, the firing lasted about 15 seconds, which was long enough to fire all 250 rounds of ammunition. Lieutenant Albert Cornell demanded Bertucci come down from the tower. He refused because some of them, meaning the Germans, are still alive.
Mm-hmm.
After another guard was sent to bring him down, Bertucci was reportedly taken into custody without any resistance. Mm-hmm. Despite his drinking prior to the incident, he was not found to be highly intoxicated upon his rest. He was pretty lucid.
Yeah, I feel like that makes sense. Like you were saying, he was even talking to that waitress.
Yeah, and he got coffee. You know, he might have wanted to. He might have been toying with it. He might have been like, "Yeah, I'm gonna get rid of my inhibitions and go take care, do this."
Yeah.
You know, and then he might have bounced back and he's like, "Oh, I should sober up and get some coffee," or maybe he's like, "I need to sober up in order to be
it's just a midnight shift.
An effective monster." Yeah, exactly. So, yikes. Guards kept a close watch for prisoner retaliation, but there was none from the Germans.
Wow.
They didn't
That's sad.
That's really sad. Yeah, they didn't. I mean,
there's only 4 left.
4 what? Prisoners?
Yeah.
Oh no, he only hit 33 of the tents. Not there was 250 soldiers. So he hit most of the tents.
I'm good at math.
But he didn't hit most of them.
I promise.
Well, I said he hit 30 of the 43.
Yeah.
So there are 13 tents.
Yeah.
No, it's cool. He hit 30 of the 43 tents.
Yes, no, I understand now.
So he was definitely thinking that he did more.
30 or 39.
30 of the 43 tents.
Oh.
So he hit 66% of them.
Yeah.
So he was that was his plan, was to just mow through them.
Mm-hmm.
6 of the Germans were killed outright, and 2 later died in Salina's hospital, and one of them died in an army hospital. Mm-hmm. And so 9 total were killed.
Okay.
And 19 others were wounded.
Yes.
You okay?
I mean, I feel a little bit like an ass saying this, but that's not.
It could have been a lot worse. That's the scary thing.
Because I'm so good at math, I was thinking that it was way worse than it was. Anyway, so
yeah.
It's a relief for me.
Well, that's good. It should be a relief.
The
The events are absolutely horrific, but they're very lucky that it wasn't much worse.
Yes.
I mean, if he had more ammo up there, if he had turned the gun onto some of his fellow soldiers, if he had,
maybe if he had had a drink and had better aim.
Right, yeah, exactly. There's so many things where so many more people could have gotten hurt. So the fact that there were only 9 is actually pretty miraculous. It's incredibly sad circumstance. There was reportedly not enough room in the hospital, so many of the prisoners were being treated on the lawn.
That sucks.
One of the prisoners was very nearly cut in half by the machine gun fire.
Ooh.
Although he survived for another 6 hours after the shooting. One newspaper reported, Clarence Bertucci was under mental observation today after admitting that he sprayed gun bullets. They called it gun bullets? Like there's other bullets. On a group. 1945, syntax was a lot different. That he sprayed gun bullets on a group of war prisoners while they slept, killing 8, which at this time was true. 1 died much later. And wounding 19 because he, quote, didn't like Germans. Just didn't like Germans. Another article reported that Bertucci showed no remorse about the shooting at a hearing conducted shortly afterward. A July 23rd, 1945 article from Time stated, Ninth Service Command officers admitted that Bertucci's record already showed 2 courts-martial, 1 in England. His own calm explanation seemed a little too simple. He'd hated Germans, so he had killed Germans.
Wow.
That's all they got out of him.
That's ridiculous.
He's a piece of work. Although there were rumors that Bertucci committed the murders in order to avenge the death of a loved one in Europe, his mother confirmed that was false.
Even if it was true.
It's still a terrible, murder.
Not even a great motive.
Yeah.
Still murder.
Yeah, exactly. His mother did, however, tell reporters that she believed his actions were due to an appendectomy he received 5 years prior to that massacre.
Oh my god. No.
So,
This is like
what's her face? Roseanne Barr saying that Ambien made her say racist things on Twitter. You know what I mean? Like, it's just wholly unrelated. Like, decisions.
I'm thinking of one of our first episodes of Richard Worthington coming to shoot him just because he was mad that his wife had a hysterectomy. Well, not a hysterectomy, but just had her tubes tied.
Yeah.
Just like.
You can't blame things that are unrelated.
I had my appendix removed, so I had to go and shoot a bunch of Germans.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Where?
Where?
Does that make sense at all?
Pitch where?
Pitch where?
Yeah, yeah. So, she told the New York Times, something must have happened to him as a result of the spinal injection. Otherwise, he never would have shot those men. Right. So it's kind of like a whatever helps you sleep at night, lady.
God, no, you know what it really reminds me of?
What does it remind you of?
It's like the Don't Fuck with Cats on Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
Like Lupa Magnotta's mom.
Yeah.
Just saying there's no way it could be him, even though there's a literal video evidence.
And a lot of other evidence, too, on top of the video evidence.
It could have been him. He's such a sweet boy.
He's getting framed for all this murder.
Ugh.
Yeah. It's... I mean...
Thanks, I hate it.
I like a mom to give someone the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
But to blame it on something like that, like...
help your kid and getting them the best
sure.
you can and still loving your kid totally. But
don't excuse their actions.
Because of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrific.
Yeah, and I say that, and my mom I know is listening, and she's gonna tell me later that she would go to prison for me if I killed somebody if she could.
She really would. I don't doubt that.
I disagree with that, Mom. But thanks, I appreciate it. I love you.
The intention is noble. Kind of. Is it noble? I don't know.
Yeah. I like to think for my mom it is because it's never gonna happen. So.
That's true. You say that now.
Yeah.
10 years from now when you're on the news for all that string of homicides.
Yeah.
Okay. So, immediately following the attack, Bertucci was placed under guard at the 9th Service Command headquarters at Fort Douglas. His army record revealed he had been punished for not just the 2, but 3 offenses. Once for being absent from his post, not the hugest deal. It's a big deal in the army. AWOL.
Once.
If it happens
Maybe
once.
Even back then, I don't know exactly how stuff was run, but.
I mean, AWOL in the Army is a punishable offense.
Yeah.
So, it's not
like,
good.
From your post, like, I don't know, like, if he just hadn't told somebody he was going to the bathroom or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think they usually substantiate it a little bit more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine if it went as far as a court-martial to be on his record, that it was a bigger problem.
Okay.
Another time he was punished for refusing to go on guard duty.
Oh.
And another time was for missing a train.
Wow.
He missed a train. And apparently if you miss a train, you're going to get punished for it. He was hospitalized 12 times during his service, several of which were mental examinations.
Ugh.
So he was notably mentally unsound at least several times during his 5 years in the Army.
That's good.
Yeah. Good. Army officers cited the reason for the attack as just insanity.
Yeah.
Because it's 1945, they don't have a nuanced look on, on race. What well, I mean, just homicidal prejudice, and a number of personality disorders this guy must have had. Captain Wayne Owens of an Ogden POW camp was assigned to investigate the incident. In contrast to the initial conclusion of the Army officers who just said quote-unquote insanity, Owens concluded that Bertucci was sane and should very much be court-martialed. So, because if he was insane, he would just be placed under medical care or under mental health care. But Wayne Owens cited the fact that there was premeditation and a number of things to prove that he was sane and he should be court-martialed. Yeah. Owens' superiors, however, claimed that Owens had no authority to judge the sanity of a man. Owens responded that a man is sane until proven insane. Owens then scrapped his initial report, but still recommended that Bertucci be court-martialed.
Oh.
Yeah, so I feel like the Army probably thought it would be cleaner with the Germans if we said, hey, we had a soldier go crazy.
Yeah.
And open fire on. Sorry about that. We can't control that. But if someone gets court-martialed for it, that means that there are things involved where this is a war crime, and the Germans might want to have some sort of get something about that. Yeah. So I understand that background, but he should still be court-martialed. I mean, he definitely was in control of his actions.
Yeah, I agree.
Owens claimed there was no evidence that Bertucci had been drinking heavily enough to be unfit for duty, and as a result, the act was calculated and of murderous intent. Some disagreed with Owens' claim, and some telegrams showed sympathy for Bertucci and the massacre, because it was the war, and as we talked about in our very, very first episode, war panic is a very real thing.
Yes, it is.
And part of war panic is the us versus them dynamic.
Yeah.
So some people might not be too sad about the fact that a bunch of Germans were killed in their tents as they were sleeping, because we were fighting the Germans, and the Germans were the bad guys, and they probably deserved it, right? So a lot of this kind of just got swept under the rug.
No, I believe that.
Major Stanley L. Richter of the Prisoner of War Operations in the United States Army Provost Marshal General's Office. Holy cow, that is the longest name of anything to ever exist. He is a major of the Prisoner of War Operations in United States Army Provost Marshal General's Office.
Okay.
That's like a sentence. Like, even the acronym's like a multi-syllable word. Okay. He reported that after receiving an initial report in the investigation, there was a possibility of court-martialing Bertucci. However, Bertucci had been evaluated for several weeks in an Army hospital in Brigham City, Utah. Doctors concluded that he was mentally unbalanced. For foregoing a court-martial, Bertucci was found insane by a panel of military officials and hospitalized in Mason General Hospital in Brentwood, New York, for an undisclosed amount of time. He died in December 1969.
Wow.
So 22 years later.
Wow.
The victims who died all died on the early morning hours of July 8th, 1945, except for Ritter, who survived until July 13th, were Otto Bross, age 25, single; Ernst Fuchs, age 24, single; Gottfried Gogg, age 29, single; George Lisk, age 31, married. Hans Meyer, age 24, single. Adolf Paul, age 28, single. Fritz Stockman, age 24, single. Walter Vogel, no age listed, married. Friedrich Ritter, died of his wounds 5 days later, age 48, wife Berta Ritter.
Sad.
The victims were buried with full military honors at Fort Douglas Cemetery on July 12th.
Okay.
They were dressed in khaki American uniforms, but there were no flags on the caskets because the Nazi flag was banned in the United States at the time. Not banned anymore, weirdly enough. And there was no new German flag available at the time. Each casket was adorned with 2 wreaths made from roses, gardenias, and carnations. 15 prisoners from Salina attended the memorial. A 17-member choir from the Ogden camp sang songs. American soldiers made sure no Nazi songs were sung. That makes sense. A second service was held for Friedrich Ritter, who died in the hospital the next day after the memorial. There were some significant delays in notifying the family members about the dead prisoners, and legal loopholes made it difficult for family members to receive financial compensation from the deaths. The wounded soldiers were sent back to Germany when they were deemed healthy enough to travel. A German agreement with the U.S. government prevented wounded prisoners from getting American compensation from their injuries, and they were only entitled to the same benefits offered for German veterans. A statue called the German War Memorial has been placed at the cemetery in Fort Douglas.
Wow.
In 1988, the German Air Force funded the refurbishment of the statue, so about 40 years later. A ceremony, was held on Volkstrauertag, the German National Day of Mourning, and 2 of the prisoners who were wounded in 1945 attended. Yeah. On November 12th, 2016, so just very recently, a museum on the site of Camp Salina was opened to the public. The Midnight Massacre is remembered for being the worst massacre at a POW camp in U.S. history.
Wow.
The Utah Prisoner of War Massacre is known as the largest killing of enemy prisoners in the United States during World War II.
Wow.
So the single deadliest death of combatant soldiers in World War II. So Utah has its own little slice of, very sad slice of World War II. So, yeah.
Very interesting, though.
It is interesting, and I feel like it's interesting. I hate to say this, but I feel like they treated the incident with such respect in the 40s. Like, even though they were German combatants, they did bury them at Fort Douglas and gave them full military honors and that sort of thing. I feel like if something like that had happened at the Japanese camp, it wouldn't have happened as well.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Because I know there were quite a few instances of abuse at Topaz.
Oh yeah.
So
I'll talk about that later. But
yeah.
You gotta. I mean, everybody in Utah is white.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying is that there's some like.
And, a lot of people here in Utah, probably have relations to a lot of Germans.
Yeah, there are a lot of Northern European immigrants.
My mother's maiden name is a very German name.
Yeah, and my lineage on my paternal grandmother's side is very Danish, which is German adjacent.
Goes back, so,
yeah.
There's
some familiarity there.
Yeah,
more familiarity than with the Japanese, and I feel like that would have been it would have been not as respectful.
Yeah.
At the other camp, which is really sad.
That's sad.
Sorry,
sad note to end
yeah, it's a sad note to end it on, but yeah, it's interesting. This is actually one of our first older crimes that we've come back to. This is in the 40s, and a lot of the stuff we've been covering has been like 80s. From 80s and 90s, and even as early as the Desiree Turner in 2017. So, it's very interesting. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for listening today. We're hard at work. We're liking the new schedule with 3 episodes a month.
The next episode will come out in February.
Yep, the next episode will come out on the first Monday of February, which I believe is the 2nd, the day after Super Bowl Sunday. So, I think Valerie's going to be writing that one for us. So I'm interested to hear what she's got.
It's going to be spooky.
It is going to be spooky. It's a fun one. So I'm looking forward to hearing about it because I actually don't know a whole lot about it. So
it's good. good.
Yeah, is it
Good
real?
stuff.
It's real good. All right, well, it better be. We've lifted it up so much. All right. Until then, I'm Jack,
And I'm Valerie.
and this is Below the Salt.